like in a real sense, we can miss our opportunity. We can miss a door that God has opened for us because we are not prepared. We can miss stepping into a divine opportunity because we have not prepared. We have not taken heed to what God has told us and prepared for what is next. Hey y'all, my name is Rachel and I'm the host of Abiding Every Day, where we exist to demystify connecting with God and guide the chronic overachiever in their journey of abiding every day in Christ with faith by sharing practical truth and systems for success that are aligned in God's Word. So, welcome back to Abiding Every Day. I'm excited for this episode because it is going to be a part 2. Last time we were here, we talked about stewardship, and I really enjoyed that episode, and I hope you did as well. But I felt like there was a little bit left on the table that we needed to discuss for stewardship. So that is what we're going to be talking about, stewardship part 2. So first, before we get started, make sure you are following me on Instagram, Rach_the Great, and the podcast page at Abiding Every Day, so you can stay current with what we have going on, new episodes, and you should know by now, if you don't, the Tag Bible App Challenge, where we read shared devotionals every day as a group and really grow in community together. We did a fast for 2 weeks leading up to Easter, social media fast, and we did some food fast days in there as well. And it was really amazing. Other week, people really sharing like their testimonies about just how God has been responding to their obedience and how God has just been showing up in all the ways. So it's really great. It's edifying community. Like the gems that I be getting in there, the gems that we all get. It's great. So join Tag Bible App Challenge. The link will be below. I only admit people at the beginning of each new month. So if you sign up now, you will be admitted for May and start with our May devotionals. We'll be reading shared devotionals until the end of this year. So sign up for that. And let's get into this episode without further ado. So stewardship part 2. Really quickly, I'm going to recap. Stewardship is a biblical concept, part 1. And so basically, that really hinged on my revelation that stewardship is not performance. It is not about striving to a certain outcome to please God and honor God in that way. Stewardship is obedience, and stewardship is abiding with faith. Faith and obedience are the beginning of stewardship. It's not about having success according to what you think success looks like. Success is obedience. That is what it is. Stewardship is obedience. Stewardship, if you're stewarding something well, that means you're doing what God told you to do with it. Not what you think it should look like, not what the world tells you it should look like. It is what God told you to do. And you have to have faith. You have to abide in Christ, what this whole platform is about, and you have to walk out your faith to steward well what God has given you and be obedient to that thing. So those are the points. Stewardship is not performance. Stewardship is obedience, and stewardship is abiding with faith. And I just wanted to go a little bit deeper on this episode because I always normally like to give y'all my systems for success, and I didn't give you a system for success last time. And I felt like there was just a little bit more we had to dig into to get like really what is a system for success for stewarding and making sure that we are stewarding well what God has given us. So with that, faith and obedience are the beginning of stewardship. So walking with faith, and being obedient and walking out your faith cycle. That is the beginning of stewardship and not striving to performance, but being obedient to specifically what God told you to do. But the next pieces that get us into more of the practical, like obedience is definitely practical, like it is what it is. But, that can be hard to walk out in your everyday. Like, okay, what does obedient mean? I don't know. I know what it means to do it, but how do I really do it in the everyday when I'm faced with all the things the world throws at me and trying to eke out this obedience? So, the two things that help us kind of walk out that obedience and walk out that stewardship well are responsibility and preparation. So, stewardship is obedience, and stewardship is abiding with faith, and stewardship is responsibility, and stewardship is preparation. So, to get us started, I have a few different parables I want to go over. Basically, Matthew 24 and 25, that is where we learn, a lot about stewardship in Matthew 24 and 25. Last week, I talked about the parable of the talents, and that is, in those chapters as well. And so we're back there. We're in Matthew 24, verses 42 through 51. And this is talking about the context in this scripture is when Jesus returns. And so this is Jesus before he was crucified, and he is talking about, what to do basically after he's gone in preparation for him to return again. So it starts at verse 42. So you too must keep watch, for you don't know what day your Lord is coming. Understand this, if a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would keep watch and not permit his house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected. A faithful, sensible servant is one to whom the master can give the responsibility of managing his other household servants and feeding them. If the master returns and finds that the servant has done a good job, there will be a reward. I tell you the truth, the master will put that servant in charge of all he owns. But what if the servant is evil and thinks, my master won't be back for a while? And he begins beating the other servants, partying, and getting drunk. The master will return unannounced and unexpected, and he will cut the servant to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So this is about managing and being responsible for what God gives us to manage and steward over, basically. So if the master leaves this servant in charge and he does a good job, there will be a reward. If the servant is like, oh, I got time, it's cool, we can do whatever. I mean, this servant might be, and this hypothetical servant went a little wild with beating people and all that type of stuff. But even if we just like, oh, I got time, it's cool, whatever, I can do what I want, I can slack off, I can, not keep the house up, not make sure the servants are fed, it's cool, they can get it how they live. So stewardship starts with responsibility. It is just really maintaining and managing what God gives us. It's not striving to perform to make sure we get this certain outcome, but it's in the day to day managing what God has given us. So, managing your time, managing your treasure, managing your talents, managing what God has given you to honor Him. Working as if Jesus is coming back today. Like each day you are managing what you have been given. So it is a daily responsibility. It is not, putting things off or biding your time or letting fear stop you from doing things that you're supposed to be doing. Like it is managing your everyday, that you have, managing the talents that God put inside of you and doing something with that. It is managing your literal time, managing your day, and making sure that you are honoring God with what you are doing throughout your day. It is managing your treasure, managing your finances that honors God, tithing and saving and doing all the things. Like it is responsibility and managing. So that is the first point. And then the second point is preparation, like I said. So stewardship is faith, obedience, responsibility, and preparation. So for preparation, I have two things I want to point out. We're in Matthew 25 here, talking about the 10 bridesmaids, verses 1 through 13. So it says, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The 5 who were foolish didn't take enough olive oil for their lamps, but the other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. When the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, they were roused by the shout, 'Look, the bridegroom is coming. Come out and meet him.' All the bridesmaids got up and prepared their lamps. Then the 5 foolish ones asked the others, 'Please give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out.' But the others replied, 'We don't have enough for all of us. Go to a shop and buy some for yourselves.' But while they were gone to buy oil, the bridegroom came. Then those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was locked. Later, when the other 5 bridesmaids returned, they stood outside calling, 'Lord, Lord, open the door for us.' But he called back, 'Believe me, I don't know you. So you too must keep watch, for you do not know the day or hour of my return.'" So same theme as last parable, but it's about preparing. So they were going to go wait out. They didn't know what time the bridegroom was coming, and he was delayed. And the other ones who were wise and prepared, they had enough oil. The ones who did not prepare did not have enough oil, and they missed the opportunity to have the wedding feast. They missed the opportunity to be with the bridegroom. And we can, like, in a real sense, we can miss our opportunity. We can miss a door that God has opened for us because we are not prepared. We can miss stepping into a divine opportunity because we have not prepared. We have not taken heed to what God has told us and prepared for what is next. So we have to prepare, like the scriptures is telling us. We have to be prepared. Stewardship is about preparation. Stewardship is about being wise and preparing so that you are ready for any opportunity that God lays in front of you. So you are ready to seize that opportunity to meet God where he will be. You are prepared. You have the necessary oil. You have the resources. You have whatever it is that you need to meet that opportunity, meet God at that place. So the other thing I want to talk about quickly, I'm not going to read all of it because it's a lot, but it is in First Chronicles chapter 28, and it is talking about David and Solomon. So at this point, David was king, and he wanted to build a temple for God. So back with Moses and the Israelites, they built the tabernacle, but the tabernacle is basically like kind of a tent. So at one point, David was king, and he was like in his castle. I don't know what they were in, the place where the king was at. And he was like, "God, I'm going to build you a temple because why should I be in this glorious place and you are outside in a tent? Like, that don't, you God, I'm me. That don't make sense. That's not adding up. I'm in this nice place. Your presence should have a beautiful house, like a real place, not just a tent outside." And God told David, "No, you are not the one to build the temple. I'm good. I'm Gucci." Basically what God has said. I don't remember the exact verse, but he basically said, "I'm Gucci. Like, it's cool. It's not for you to do." Basically, like, because David, you're a warrior. You have shed too much blood. You can't build my temple. So God told David his son Solomon was going to take over, and that Solomon would be tasked to build the temple, that it wasn't for David to build, but for Solomon to build. And what David did, I found so interesting as I was reading it. David prepared for the temple so that Solomon was able to build it. Solomon had it easier. So God did reveal the plans for the temple to David. So he recorded the plans for the temple, how it should be built, those types of things. And he prepared by getting the materials. He started collecting the gold, all the materials for the temple. David started collecting those. And then David told Solomon, hey, you're going to be king. God has told me I am not supposed to build this temple. You are supposed to build this temple. And he gave him, like words of wisdom about being king, about building the temple, and all those types of things. So David prepared in so many ways. He prepared by listening to God about the plans and recording them. He prepared by gathering the materials to build the temple, and he prepared by educating Solomon and giving him wisdom about what he was about to enter into. And another thing he did was gathered the other kind of influential people and basically passed the mantle to Solomon publicly and was like, God told me not to build this temple. He said it was for Solomon to build. Solomon's going to be king. So I'm asking for you to support him as he's king, but also support him in building this temple. So there was maybe a few more materials and supplies they needed. And he was like, give these to him, support him in this way. And when I was reading that, I was like, that's so amazing because he prepared everything so that the way would be easier for Solomon. And that's a whole other word about preparing to make the way easier for the next person, for your children. But we're not talking about that right. I mean, that is part of stewardship, but we're not diving all the way into that right now. But it is about preparation. It is about preparing for what is next, preparing for what God has told you is next. And I want to point out it's not about making plans, though. This is something that God has kind of talked to me about recently that I may do another episode about. But preparing yourself and your circumstances for God's plans, not making your own plans to accomplish what God told you to do. Those are like very similar things, but very different. Sometimes God tells us something and it seems he doesn't give us all the details. And we can fall into the trap of trying to plan all the details and over plan and over figure everything out when God has the details covered. He just didn't tell you to go do all them things for all them details. But for you to be able to steward over what God has told you is next, it is about preparing for that, not going and making all the plans. I hope that's making sense. I'm going to give an example. For me, I feel like God is telling me to move. I don't know exactly when I'm going to be moving, but I'm going to move at some point. And when God first told me that I was supposed to move, this like months ago. When God first told me about moving, I was like, okay, looking for apartments, looking for whatever. And then I felt like I was like, girl, what are you doing? You're doing too much. I tell you to go make all the plans and all the things. And I was like, okay, God, that's cool. I'm going to prepare. I don't know what's next, but I'm just going to prepare. And for me to prepare, moving costs money. So I am preparing for what is next by saving as much money as possible so that I am ready to seize whatever opportunity God has. So it is not searching all over the internet for the best apartment, because you can just get into so many things. Like when we start making our own plans and start diving deep, I know me, like I go into rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole on the internet. I start looking at one thing and then all of a sudden I'm over here like, how did I even get here? I don't know. But now we're here. So that can distract you. Trying to make those plans and trying and looking at all the options and figuring out all these things, that can easily turn into distraction when God already has something laid out and something planned out for you, that if you're prepared for it, you have the money for it, you have the resources, you have the time, you have the opportunity, then you can be prepared to step into it. Not that you have done all this research and figured everything out and now you can execute your plan and act like it's God's plan when you was just doing your own thing and making your own plans to do what God said, but it's still your own plans. So it is about preparation, not over planning. Now, I'm not saying you should never plan anything. I'm not saying that at all. But it's about following God's directions. It's about obedience. It's not about getting one little word and jumping to it and over planning and doing all the things. It's about, okay, I got the word. What can I do to prepare for that word? David said, okay, God, you gave me the plans for what the temple is going to be. I'm going to write them down. And then I'm going to just start collecting the materials. I'm not planning out how this is going to be built. I'm not planning out the timeline for the building because God told David he wasn't supposed to build it. Solomon was supposed to build it. He gave Solomon the plans for how the temple was supposed to be built and what that looks like, and he gathered the materials. He didn't plan everything out for him. He made the way easier for Solomon to accomplish what God said, but Solomon still had to do things to execute it. It wasn't that David literally just jumped and did everything. Oh God, I'm not going to physically build it, but I'm going to do everything else outside of it. No. He wrote down what God told him about what it's supposed to be, and he prepared the resources so that Solomon had the resources he needed to accomplish what God told him to do. So those are the two more points about stewardship. So stewardship is faith and obedience. We talked about that in part 1. And stewardship is responsibility and preparation. That is what we're talking about in part 2. So like I said, I do like to leave y'all with a system for success. So my system for success, there's 3 points to it. And the first is to stay current with what God is telling you. So we can't be obedient and walk out our faith with responsibility and in preparation if we don't know what God is telling us to do. We're missing a step here. And so I just wanted to point out 2 major pitfalls that we get into when it comes to obedience. Like when we can hear what God is telling us. The first thing is sometimes God says something and we just go with it. And we're like, okay, God told me to do this way, and that's what I'm doing. And then God changes course. And we still trying to do the old thing that he told us to do, but now he's telling us a new thing to do. And maybe he's not even clearly telling us a new thing to do yet, but the grace has been lifted for us to do the old thing he was telling us to do. So now the old thing he was telling us to do, it's not really working out. And we don't have it's hard for us to do that. And not in the way where like it's hard fleshly and the enemy is trying to prevent us. But there's a difference in like opposition from the enemy in trying to accomplish what God has told you to do. And there's a difference when like it's just hard to do what used to be easy. Those are 2 different things. So what used to just flow and you were walking in obedience, now it's like, this ain't flowing. Like there's definitely some checks you can do, make sure your heart is right, make sure you have all what you need in line. But sometimes that's just an indication that God has changed course and he wants you to do something different. And I'll give an example. For me, my Bible time has been like my time with God has been that for me, because typically I just get up in the morning, I go in my closet, I get in my Bible, I'm in my journal, we talking, we worshiping, we doing all the things. And maybe a month or so ago, it just was started getting hard to do that. And I'm like, I can't concentrate reading the word, and it's just not like, it just wasn't clicking. And I'm like, okay, God, this is not clicking. I'm trying to, I don't know, I'm confusion. What is happening? And long story short, it took me a little bit to kind of figure it out. But at this point, I do walks and I pray. I listen to the Bible instead of reading my physical Bible right now. I worship. I pray, all those things during my walk. And I'll do those things in other times throughout the day, like listening to the Bible and obviously worshiping and praying, those types of things. But I really realized that God had just like removed the grace for a second for me getting in my closet and doing that. He wanted me to do something different. He wanted me to change locations and connect with him in a different way. And so that is what I'm doing now. I do my prayer walks in the morning mostly, but if I don't, and it's something I just make sure I do, even if I wake up late, I gotta go outside and walk this little path around my house for these 30 minutes. And part of that, I think for me, is definitely attached to my health. My health is something that I've been trying to pay more attention to, and do feel like God has called me to like pay a little bit more attention to my health and those types of things. And so I think he's like forcing me outside, like ready to go walk around. And the only way you're gonna be able to connect with me right now is if you walking around. So go do that. So that's where I'm at with that right now. But stay current with what God is telling you and pay attention to what's happening. Pay attention to the changes and lean into it. Change is icky sometimes. I'm like, God, I liked going in the closet and I liked journaling and talking to you. Like, that's cool. And keep it hot with the prayer rocks. I mean, it's cool, but it don't hit the same way that my journaling in the closet used to hit. It don't. And trying to I've only been doing it for a little bit. So my journaling and my prayer didn't always hit at the beginning either. So I'm just walking that out. And that doesn't mean that I'm never going to be in my prayer closet. I'm never going to be in my Bible, in my journal, stuff like that. But it's just embracing the change where God is leading you to. So that is one thing. Stay current with what God is telling you. And the other thing with staying current is sometimes we keep asking God, okay, God, what am I supposed to do? What do you want me to do? How am I supposed to be obedient? And he may not be saying anything, or it seems like he's not saying anything, but it's really he already told you and you just forgot, or you thought that was over and done with a little too prematurely. And I definitely have fallen into this. So just stay current and ask God. If you're like not hearing, you can be like, okay, God, if there's something that you have already told me to do and I forgot, Lord, I repent for not, holding that close to my heart, but can you bring it to my remembrance? Can you reveal it? That type of prayer you can do. And if you have been journaling, go back in your journals and read. Like, that is something that has been really good for me. I think I talked about that before. Go back in your journal and read what it says because you probably wrote it down and God probably already said it. So those are the two things under stay current with what God is telling you. Embrace when he's changing it up, and make sure that you did the last thing he told you to do. And if not, if you're confused or unsure what he wants you to do, go back to the last thing he told you to do. It's probably there. You didn't do it. You didn't finish it, what he told you to do. The second system for success is to use your resources prayerfully. And what I want to say about this, it is closely tied to the responsibility piece. So learn about what God is calling you to do. So there's people in your circle, there are people on the internet, like there are experts that know about something that God is calling you to do. An example is me doing this podcast. So God has called me to do this podcast, and I'm like, well, there's definitely lots of people who know how to do podcasts, right? But there is a podcast that I listen to, and the host, she has a business where she helps people do podcasts. So I engaged with her, Tatum, and Anchored Media, and she has a course. She has a lot of offerings, but what I had engaged with was a course about profitable podcasting, is what it's called. And I learned a lot about podcasting. I learned kind of like all the things I needed to know, and that really helped lay the groundwork for starting my podcast. There were some things I still had to learn on my own, but following the information she had helped me to do this because I didn't know about nothing about podcasts. I knew I liked listening to them, and that's all I knew. But I used my resources and I paid a little bit of money so that I could understand what I was embarking and do it as well as I could. And I said, so that's using your resources, but the point is to use your resources prayerfully. And why I say prayerfully is because doing things God's way doesn't mean you just follow what an expert says or what your community says. It means you pray and you engage with the resources, but you are praying and using your discernment with the information that you get, and that you are staying current. Back to the first step, you're staying current with what God is telling you to do. So what that looks like is, in a practical example with the podcasting, Tatum, her thing is about profitable podcasting. And the two basic ways you make money podcasting is advertisers, or you have a business where you're funneling your audience into your business and buying your products, engaging with your services, those different types of things. And so she gave a lot of great information about how to funnel your listeners into your business. But the thing is, I don't have no business. And God didn't tell me to do no business right now. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But he didn't tell me to do no business. And I don't have no products. I don't have nothing to sell people. And so if I was just following what Tatum said without paying attention to what God was telling me, I'm thinking, oh, I need to start a business. If I want to make money doing this, I need to start a business. And then you get into this pattern when God didn't tell me to make the podcast to make money. You know what I'm saying? Not that he doesn't want me to make money from this. I'm not saying that by any means, but that wasn't the impetus for what he told me to do. So paying attention to what God is telling you and using your resources prayerfully. But even in that, there are things from what she said about funneling people into your business that I can prepare and set my podcast up to still work with that model. So, for example, the Tag Bible App Challenge, I created that, number one, because God told me to, but number two, it will also be a potential sales funnel. I have this group of people, I have their contact information, they're engaging with me on these devotionals, they're engaging in the community, and I can create funnels of things that I know people in my audience are interested in. So people like devotionals. And there's people who engage with the devotionals and they read the devotionals on their own time, and that's what they do. There's people who are in the community heavy. They're in the group me. They're communicating every day. They're responding every day in the app for the devotionals. Those people are interested in the devotionals, but they are also very interested in communities. So even with the challenge, those are two separate groups of people already. There's people who just like doing the devotionals. They like the accountability. They like the access of having the devotionals every day to their phone. Then there's people who like the devotionals, but they also like to engage in community. So those are already two different potential sales funnel for different products maybe I'll have in the future. So my podcast is still positioned to potentially be profitable in that way if God leads me in that way. So it's about using your resources prayerfully. Third is honor God and lean on Him. One thing that I've heard that I've really liked is stewardship is about honoring God with your time, your talents, and your treasures. So honor God. That's the big step. Honor God. And we do that by being obedient. We do that by having faith. We do that by being responsible and preparing. But it is honoring God with your time, your talents, and your treasures, and leaning on Him, because His strength is perfected in our weakness. In this journey of stewarding and just being a Christian and following God and honoring Him and doing those things is hard. It can get difficult, it can get weary, and it can get hard. But leaning on Him, it's so easy. Something that has been heavy for me right now, it's so easy to get distracted. It's so easy to drift. Like I've been in my personal life and been in my conversations with people in sermons. It has just been a common theme about distractions and drifting right now. I've heard so many people talk about how they just haven't been engaging with God the way they used to, and it's not they're kind of distracted, or they're just not doing what they were doing before. And so it's really heavy right now, especially like for people I'm in community with. And we just have to still show up. We still have to lean on Him. We still have to press in. And I was actually listening to somebody on Instagram the other day, and they were like, we think we have to do all these things to get back right with God. We got to get back right. But it's just about showing up every day. Show up. Be like, God, I don't know how I'm going to do today. Shoot, today. When I tell you today has been a struggle, it is 11:16 p.m. on Monday, April 12th, and this episode is going out tomorrow, April 13th. It has been a day, and I have really had to lean on God all day to do the things that I need to do. Now, I kind of mismanaged my weekend and last week, so that's why it's extra a lot today. But that was my weakness. That's where I fell short, but I can lean on God. I have been leaning on Him all day, and He has brought me through this day. And I'm going to get off this mic and I'm going to go to bed. But it is honoring God and leaning on Him. So I'm going to wrap up and stop there. Recap: stewardship is faith, obedience, responsibility, and preparation. And a system for success for stewarding is stay current with what God is telling you, use your resources prayerfully, and honor God and lean on Him. And we will all be able to use those to go on throughout our journey of stewarding, throughout our journey of abiding in the vine, in Christ, every day. Thank you for listening or watching. Follow me on Instagram, Rach_the Great, and at Abiding Every Day. Tag Bible App Challenge sign up is in the description box. And I look forward to abiding every day together, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.